There are moments in war that defy logic, moments when death should have had the final word, but didn't. It happened in the dusty mountains of Afghanistan in the summer of 2012. A convoy of American soldiers was returning from a patrol near Kandahar. Heat shimmered on the horizon, the air smelled of diesel and sand. Specialist Ethan Cole, 26 years old, was the loud one in the Humvee. He had a Virgin Mary medal hanging from his rear-view mirror, a gift from a nurse back home that he called his good luck charm. Except it wasn't his idea. It was a dare. "Watch this," he told the guys. He laughed, snapped the tiny medal off its chain, and tossed it onto the dashboard. "Let's see if the Virgin protects us today." The men laughed, half nervous, half tired. They'd just spent 2 weeks clearing IED routes where no one wanted to drive. 5 minutes later, the world exploded. An improvised bomb buried under the road blew their vehicle into the air. The blast tore through metal like paper. When the smoke cleared, everyone thought Ethan was gone. But somehow, his helmet, split and scorched, had stopped a piece of shrapnel that should have gone straight through his skull. Right beside his temple, inside the dent, they found something melted into the Kevlar, the small silver medal he'd just mocked. No one spoke for a long time. Even the medics, hardened by a dozen missions, stood still. Later, back at the base, one of his brothers in arms would whisper to the chaplain, "I think Our Lady was in that truck." Ethan Cole was born in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio, the middle child of a mechanic and a Sunday school teacher. He'd grown up Catholic. But by the time he joined the Army, church was a memory from another life. In high school, he was known for his sarcasm, sharp, funny, sometimes cruel. Faith was for old ladies and scared people, he'd say. After 9/11, something shifted. He enlisted out of anger, not conviction. By 2012, he was on his third deployment, leading a small recon team in southern Afghanistan. Those who served with him remember a man who hid his fear behind humor. He'd play poker with worn-out cards, quote movie lines under fire, and tell rookies, "If the Virgin wants to protect me, she'd better learn how to dodge bullets." Corporal Luis Ramirez, his best friend, was different. A quiet Catholic from El Paso, Ramirez carried a rosary in his pocket and prayed before every patrol. Sometimes he'd press a small medal of the Virgin Mary into Ethan's hand. "Just keep it," Ramirez would say. "No cost." Ethan would smirk. "You think this is magic?" "Not magic," Ramirez replied. "Just love." A week before the explosion, Ramirez had been injured by a roadside blast and sent back to Germany. Before leaving, he tossed his medal to Ethan. "Hang it up," he said. "She'll watch the road for you." Ethan shrugged and did it, part joke, part superstition. He told everyone it was for luck, but deep down, he wanted to believe something out there still cared. That fragile gesture, half mocking and half hopeful, would soon become the center of a story that military investigators couldn't explain, doctors couldn't dismiss, and Ethan himself could never forget. Because when his convoy hit that IED, science had an answer for everything, except why he lived. The mission that morning was supposed to be routine. Route clearance along Highway 1, one of those stretches that every soldier hated and every insurgent loved. The sun had just risen over the horizon, bleeding orange over a landscape of rock and dust. In the distance, Afghan children herded goats along the road, waving shyly at the passing convoy. Inside the Humvee, the air was thick with diesel, sweat, and radio static. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, helmet tilted back, trying to shake off a hangover from the instant coffee he'd gulped at dawn. His tone, as usual, was sharp. "You really think she's watching us?" he said, flicking the small Virgin Mary medal that hung from the mirror. Private Kane, a rookie barely 20, shrugged. "Maybe. My mom says angels watch soldiers," Ethan snorted. "Then I must have scared mine off a long time ago." He didn't mean it with hate, more like defense. Somewhere deep inside, he knew that laughing was safer than believing. Belief made you vulnerable. Belief meant hope, and hope could be crushed. Over the radio, their squad leader, Sergeant Donnelly, gave the order to move out. Convoy 1, check in. Eyes open for fresh dig marks. Repeat, eyes open. They all knew what that meant. New IEDs, the deadliest kind, laid overnight under patches of road that looked perfectly normal. They rolled forward, tires kicking up clouds of brown dust. Locals watched from mud brick houses, silent. Ethan scanned the horizon through the dirty windshield. His rifle rested on his lap. He was thinking about home, Ohio summers, backyard barbecues, his father's old radio playing Johnny Cash. Then the convoy slowed. The road narrowed between two small hills, the perfect choke point. Ethan's Humvee was second in line. A few kids were waving on the roadside, but one of them suddenly ran away, fast. The driver cursed. That's not good. Ethan tightened his grip on the metal that lay on the dashboard. It glinted for a second under the sunlight. "Hey, Ramirez," he murmured under his breath, "if your lady's real, now's the time." Overhead, a helicopter droned. The mountains stood silent, ancient witnesses to yet another human story of fear and faith. Then came the first crack of static. The bomb detection team's metal detector caught a faint signal, a buried wire. "Possible trigger!" someone shouted. They stopped the convoy. Ethan jumped out to cover the left flank. From the ridge above, someone watched through binoculars, an insurgent, maybe two. The trap was ready. Ethan's unit didn't know it yet, but the detonator had already been armed. For a moment, everything was still. The wind carried the smell of burnt rubber and sand. A goat bleated somewhere far off, and then Ethan heard a whisper, faint, behind him. At first he thought it was Kane, but Kane was 20 feet away. The voice was soft, almost musical. A woman's voice. "Get down." He turned his head, frowning. Who said that? No one answered. Seconds later, the world went white. A sound like thunder tore the ground apart. The Humvee lifted off the road, flipping sideways as fire engulfed the air. The explosion didn't sound like what Hollywood shows. It was deeper, like the sky itself collapsing. The blast wave slammed Ethan backward. Heat seared the air. Then came the weightless silence that only the dying ever hear. He hit the ground hard, face down in dust and fire. For a moment there was no sound, no color, just ringing in his ears and a strange pressure in his chest. He tried to move but couldn't. His body felt detached, as if he were watching from outside himself. Fragments of memory flashed. Kane screaming. The driver's seat torn apart, flames licking through twisted metal. And somewhere amid the chaos, her voice again, soft, calm, like a lullaby cutting through the noise. "Don't be afraid." He opened his eyes. The smoke cleared for a heartbeat, and through the dust he saw a figure, a woman standing a few feet away, draped in light. Her face was veiled, her outline flickering as if made of sunlight passing through water. She reached out a hand, not touching him, just guiding. Pointing toward the road behind him, Ethan blinked, and she was gone. Only the metal remained, half melted, lying beside his helmet. That's when he realized he was alive. He rolled onto his back, gasping, coughing up dust. A jagged piece of shrapnel had pierced the rim of his helmet, stopped just above his temple. If it had gone half an inch deeper, the medics would be zipping up a bag. Nearby, someone yelled, "Man down! We need a medic!" Boots thudded through the debris. The medic, Corporal Nguyen, dropped to his knees beside Ethan. "Stay with me, soldier. You hearing me?" Ethan tried to nod. His mouth was full of sand and blood. Nguyen looked at the dent in the helmet and froze. "What the—" He brushed away the soot, revealing something embedded in the Kevlar, a tiny piece of metal, silver and round, fused right into the impact. It was the Virgin Mary metal. Nguyen stared. This stopped it? Ethan managed a weak laugh. Guess she really was watching. Then he blacked out. When he woke up hours later, He was in the field hospital near Kandahar. The tent smelled of iodine and diesel. A chaplain was standing by his bed holding that same medal in a small plastic bag. "Specialist Cole," the chaplain said softly. "The doctors can't explain it. The blast pattern, the trajectory, it should have gone straight through. But something diverted it." Ethan turned his head, groggy. "You think it's her?" The chaplain smiled faintly. "I think she was closer than you realize." Outside, the desert wind howled, rattling the canvas walls. Inside, for the first time in years, Ethan closed his eyes and whispered a prayer. Simple, shaky, but real. "Thank you." The Army doesn't call things miracles. They call them anomalies. 3 days after the explosion, investigators arrived at the scene. They measured blast radius, soil depth, metal fragments, everything. Their conclusion was straightforward. The IED had been triggered prematurely, its main charge misdirected. But when they examined Ethan's helmet, the tone in the tent shifted. The shrapnel fragment, 3 inches long, had entered at an angle impossible under known trajectories. The melted imprint of the metal was fused inside the Kevlar layers, as if pressed there by an unseen hand. Captain Rhodes, the explosives analyst, frowned. "I've seen helmets stop bullets," he said, "but not this. The metal should have shattered the lining. It didn't even crack." The medic, Corporal Nguyen, added quietly, "He was the closest to the blast. No one else walked away." The report later used sterile language, "object deflected under unknown thermal distortion," but those who saw it knew. Something about that impact made no sense. At the field hospital, Ethan was recovering, groggy from morphine. A nurse taped the metal bag to the edge of his bed. When she left, he stared at it for a long time. He remembered laughing at it, mocking it. And now, that same metal had burned its way into the only thing keeping him alive. Word spread through the camp fast. Some soldiers started wearing medals or rosaries under their vests. Others dismissed it as coincidence. Sergeant Donnelly, his commander, summed it up best during a debrief. "You can believe whatever you want, but that man should be dead, and he's not." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard that voice again. Calm, steady, impossible to forget. "Don't be afraid." He didn't know what it meant, not yet. But deep down, he understood. This wasn't just survival. It was an invitation. When Ethan landed back in the United States, the world felt too quiet. No sirens, no gunfire, just the hum of air conditioning and the distant chatter of families waiting for their soldiers. He stepped off the plane at Fort Benning, Georgia, walking with a slight limp. The metal was still in his pocket, now darkened and bent, like something ancient dug out of the ground. His mother ran to him first, crying. His father, a stoic man, shook his hand and whispered, "You're home, son." But Ethan barely heard him. He saw the small cross hanging from his mother's neck and felt a strange unease. He didn't know how to pray anymore, not after mocking what had saved him. In the weeks that followed, sleep became his enemy. Every night he woke drenched in sweat, hearing again that woman's voice, that whisper in the fire. "Don't be afraid." He wanted to believe it was real, but part of him feared he'd imagined everything, that his mind had built the miracle just to survive. At the VA hospital, a therapist called it survivor's guilt. "You're alive when others aren't," she said. "It's normal to question why." But deep down, Ethan knew it wasn't only guilt, it was gratitude, mixed with fear. What if heaven had reached out once, and he never said thank you? He started visiting the small Catholic chapel near base. At first he'd sit in the last pew, silent, staring at the flickering candles. No prayers, just silence. One afternoon, an old chaplain recognized him. "You're the soldier with the medal," the priest said gently. Ethan looked up. "That's what they call me now." The chaplain smiled. "Then maybe you already know what you were spared for." Ethan didn't answer, but something inside him stirred. Not certainty, not yet, just a longing to understand. Because for the first time since the blast, he realized the miracle hadn't ended on that road in Afghanistan. It had only begun. It started as a rumor, the kind that travels faster than orders in a military base. A soldier mocked a Virgin Mary medal in Afghanistan and survived a direct IED blast. At first, nobody outside the unit believed it, but then a photograph appeared. It showed Ethan's scorched helmet with a small silver shape melted into the Kevlar, the outline unmistakably Marion. The image made its way onto a private Facebook group for veterans. Within hours, hundreds of comments appeared. Saw stuff like that in Iraq. Can't explain it. Maybe it's coincidence, or maybe it's mercy. I'm not Catholic, but this gives me chills. A week later, a freelance journalist named Sarah Doyle contacted Ethan. She had covered the war for years. Tough, skeptical, not the type to chase miracles. "I'm not here to make you a saint," she told him. "I just want to know what happened." Ethan hesitated. He didn't like attention, but something about her tone, honest, unpolished, made him agree. They met at a quiet diner near Columbus. He laid the medal on the table between them. It still bore the burn marks, edges curled like petals. Sarah lifted her camera, then lowered it again. "You sure you want to share this?" He nodded. "If it helps someone believe?" "Yeah." Her article came out a month later. Saved by the Medal, a soldier's story from the Afghan front. It didn't sensationalize anything, just facts, quotes, and one haunting line. He heard a voice in the fire, and it told him not to be afraid. The piece spread quickly, from Catholic news blogs to mainstream media. Emails began arriving at the base chapel. Veterans writing, mothers praying, strangers thanking Ethan for reminding them that faith still had a place in war. Ethan read every message quietly, unsure how to respond. But one evening, when Sarah called to say her inbox was flooded with stories of other soldiers carrying medals and rosaries again, Ethan finally smiled. "Then maybe," he said softly, "that voice wasn't just for me." Captain Donnelly had never been a man of faith. He'd seen too much, burned convoys, folded flags, funerals with no bodies to bury. In his words, God stopped showing up in war zones a long time ago. When the story about Ethan's medal spread through the base, Donnelly was the first to dismiss it. Kevlar did its job, he told the platoon, not heaven. He didn't mean disrespect, and he simply couldn't afford belief. In his world, faith was a luxury, not armor. But 2 months later, during another patrol near the same valley, fate brought him back to the edge of disbelief. His convoy hit a stretch of road that looked eerily familiar. Same hills, same dusty horizon. Only this time, Donnelly's own vehicle rolled over a hidden explosive. The blast ripped the front axle clean off. The Humvee spun, slammed into a ditch, and smoke filled the cabin. When the dust settled, Donnelly stumbled out, dazed but alive. He looked down and saw something hanging from his vest, a small medal on a black cord. It wasn't his. It had been tucked into the radio pouch by one of his men, a quiet private named Jensen. Jensen approached, trembling. "Sir, I thought maybe she could watch over you, like she did for Cole." Donnelly didn't speak. He just stared at the medal, still warm from the blast. Later that night, he found Ethan sitting by the campfire, writing in a small notebook. The captain dropped the medal in front of him. "Yours?" Ethan shook his head. "No, sir. Looks like she's watching you now." For the first time in years, Donnelly smiled, not his usual half-smirk, but something real. He picked up the medal and turned it in his hand. "Tell your lady," he said quietly, "she's got my attention." After that, the man who never prayed was often seen walking to the chapel at dusk. He never talked about it, but the other soldiers noticed, and from then on, before every mission, he'd say 3 simple words over the radio: "May she guard us." 6 months after the explosion, Ethan finally boarded a flight to Germany. His doctors said it was for follow-up therapy. But in truth, he wanted to see one person, Corporal Luis Ramirez, the man who had given him the medal. Ramirez was recovering at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center, his leg still in a brace, his smile as gentle as ever. When Ethan walked into the room, Ramirez laughed. "Bro, you look like you fought a volcano." Ethan grinned. "Yeah, and your lady won." They sat in silence for a moment. Ethan pulled something from his pocket. The charred metal, its edges bent like wings. This was hers. Now it's ours. Ramirez took it carefully, his eyes wet. "When I gave it to you, I asked her to protect you. Guess she listened." Ethan looked down. "I mocked it that day, told everyone it was a good luck charm. Then it saved me. How do you even say thank you for that?" Ramirez smiled softly. "You live like you believe it." That night they walked together to the base chapel, a small room lit by a single candle before a statue of the Virgin Mary. The statue was simple, not ornate. White plaster, hands open, eyes downcast. But as Ethan knelt beside his friend, the flame flickered and cast a gentle light on her face. For a second, he thought he saw her smile. No voice, no vision. Just a peace that settled in his chest like breathing after running too long. Ramirez whispered a short prayer in Spanish, "Madre de Dios, gracias por cuidarnos." Ethan didn't understand every word, but he felt them. When they stood, he touched the statue's base and said quietly, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Outside, snow was falling over Germany, soft and slow, covering the wounds of the past in white. For the first time, Ethan knew he was healing, not just his body, but his soul. Coming home was harder than Ethan expected. No explosions, no orders. Just silence. But silence can be the loudest thing of all. He moved into a small apartment on the edge of Columbus, near a field where the wind always seemed to whistle through the grass. From the outside, he looked fine, healed, strong, even smiling. But inside, every night replayed the same moment, the flash, the fire, the voice. He'd wake at 3 a.m., gasping, hand pressed to the side of his head. Doctors called it PTSD. He called it the war that followed him home. One night, during a thunderstorm, he sat on the floor by his bed holding the medal. Lightning flickered through the window, and he whispered, "If you were really there, I need you now." No answer came, just rain. Then the lights went out. The room fell into darkness except for one faint glow, the small corner shelf where he'd placed a photo of Ramirez and a tiny Virgin Mary statue he'd found at a thrift store. The statue shimmered softly, as if lit from within. No flash, no sound, just a warm blue light spreading gently across the room. It lasted maybe 10 seconds, but in that silence, Ethan felt the same peace he'd known in the chapel. When the power returned, the light was gone, but so were the shaking hands. For the first time in months, he slept. The next morning, sunlight filled the apartment. The medal still lay beside him, untarnished. And when he looked closer, he noticed something new, a tiny cross-shaped reflection at its center, like light trapped in metal. He smiled. "All right," he whispered. "Message received." From that night on, the nightmares stopped. He didn't talk about the glow, not to doctors, not to family, but every morning before stepping outside, he'd touch the medal and say quietly, "Lead me where you want me to go." It began with a letter, an invitation from a veterans chaplain who organized pilgrimages for wounded soldiers. "Come to Lourdes," it said. "You've already seen the battlefield. Maybe it's time to see peace." Ethan almost threw it away. France felt too far, too sentimental. But something in his chest stirred. A whisper, "Go." 6 months later, he found himself in the foothills of the Pyrenees, standing among hundreds of pilgrims from every nation, wheelchairs, crutches, uniforms, and hope. The air was cool, filled with the scent of candles and spring water. At the grotto of Massabielle, where the Virgin Mary had once appeared to St. Bernadette, Ethan waited in line to touch the rock wall. When his turn came, he pressed his hand against the cold stone. It was smooth, damp, alive somehow. He whispered, "You saved me once, I don't know why, but I'm here to say thank you." No thunder, no visions. Just a quiet warmth spreading from the stone into his chest, a calm so deep it silenced everything. He felt tears on his face and didn't wipe them away. Later that evening, during the candlelight procession, he walked beside other veterans, men missing limbs, women with burns, all carrying small candles that trembled in the wind. Someone began singing Ave Maria. Voices joined, one by one, until the night glowed with light and sound. Ethan looked up at the statue above the grotto. The Virgin's face was gentle, radiant, unchanging. For a brief second, he thought she was looking directly at him. He smiled through his tears and whispered, "I'm still here." And in his heart, the same words came back, quiet, certain, "I know." A year after Lourdes, Ethan returned to Ohio. Life had found rhythm again. Work at a Veterans Outreach Center, weekend visits to his parents, quiet Sundays at church. The medal stayed on his desk, resting on a folded flag and a photo of Ramirez. One afternoon, a young Marine named Tyler came to the center. He was 22, recently discharged after losing a friend in combat. He said little, just sat in silence until the others left. Ethan poured 2 cups of coffee and waited. Finally, Tyler spoke. "Everyone keeps telling me to move on, but I can't stop asking, why him and not me?" Ethan looked at the trembling hands, the same question he had once carried like a stone in his chest. He opened his drawer and took out the medal, now polished, light catching on its edges. "This kept me alive," he said quietly. Tyler stared. "You believe that?" "I do now. But it's not about surviving. It's about remembering who carried you through." He pressed the medal into Tyler's palm. "Take it. Not as luck. As love." Tyler tried to refuse. "I can't take yours." Ethan smiled. "It was never mine to keep." That night, Ethan watched from the chapel doorway as the young Marine knelt under the soft glow of candles. The medal hung from his fingers, shining like new silver. Outside, the evening sky turned gold. The world was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't hurt anymore. Ethan closed his eyes and prayed, not for himself, but for everyone still fighting unseen battles. "Mother," he whispered, "watch over them, like you watched over me." A gust of wind swept through the open door, flickering the candles but not extinguishing them, and for just an instant, Ethan thought he heard the same gentle voice again. "Don't be afraid." War leaves scars that medals can't heal, but sometimes the smallest medal, the one meant as a joke, becomes a doorway to mercy. Ethan Cole's story isn't about superstition or luck. It's about a God who never stopped reaching out, even to those who laughed first, a soldier who mocked faith, only to be saved by the sign of that very faith. He no longer calls himself a hero. He says he's a witness of love, of protection, of the quiet patience of a mother who waits for her children to remember her. Every year on the anniversary of the blast, Ethan drives to the Veterans Memorial in Columbus. He stands before the names etched in black granite, lays a single white rose, and prays the same 7 words. "Thank you for giving me another day." No camera, no audience. Just a man and his prayer. For those who hear his story today, maybe the message is simple. Faith doesn't always come in visions or thunder. Sometimes it hides in the ashes of what we thought we'd lost, waiting for us to see the light again. Because miracles aren't always about surviving explosions. Sometimes they're about finding peace after the smoke clears. And for anyone who feels far from God, remember Ethan's words to the young Marine, "It wasn't luck, it was love." If this story touched your heart, share it. Subscribe to Avi Miracles to keep these true stories of faith alive. And tonight, wherever you are, whisper a prayer for every soldier still walking through their own desert. Because even there, Our Lady walks with them.